video, as I said, of the collapse shows it going straight down, pancaking in its own footprint. The 9/11 Commission does actually not really say much about this collapse. And the mainstream media never really went into it, right? No plane hit the building, period. Why did it collapse? How? Right? Now, and then you've got, of course, Mr. Silverstein, Larry Silverstein, the leaseholder of the World Trade Center complex. And I'm going to talk about him just for 2 seconds here. He said, well, in an interview afterwards, he said, "Oh, we decided to just pull it. It was too damaged. We just pull it." Now that's actually a demolition term yet again. Pulling a building means you're now ready to, well, collapse it onto its own footprint. Really.
That's right.
What it means. You start. Well, it comes from pulling, meaning the rip. It's like a cord that you pull.
Yep.
That triggers the explosives. That's really what that means. And he said that. And then afterwards he said, "Oh yeah, that's not what I meant. I misspoke. We just decided to evacuate people and all that because we know it's going to collapse, etc., etc." Again, in the history of the world, before as well as after 9/11, no high-rise buildings have collapsed due to fire. Not a one. And while you might argue, well, the Twin Towers, they were exceptionally tall, and maybe that's because the physics are a bit different or whatever. Well, no, not really. Physics is physics. It's just, unfortunately, physics applies to everything equally, as much as some people would like to not have that happen. But you could argue that because there were such tall buildings, maybe there are certain factors we just don't know, etc., etc. Fine. But the World Trade Center building number 7 was a modest skyscraper. Again, 47 floors, that's a tall building, right? But it is not massive, and it is comparable to other skyscrapers that caught fire and did not collapse. So why did it? Now, again, and I have this from a friend of mine, who shall remain nameless, who had a friend. So it's a third-hand story, if you will, who was a serving person, like a server, waiter type stuff, on a private boat in New York, which happened to belong to Larry Silverstein. And he was a serving personnel there, serving drinks, cleaning off whatever. Just like you would have if you're a rich person, you've got a whole bunch of people working for you on that boat. Clearly, though, they didn't really care. It's really funny, Dave. Mm-hmm. These once you've got servants, or you're used to having these kinds of domestic, I guess, staff around, they sort of, and this is going to sound really terrible, but they sort of become part of the furniture. But you don't really think of them as people that are eavesdropping. It's just someone that is there to, I don't know, to work for you and clean up after you and bring you a drink, right? But you don't really give them, you don't pay them much mind. It's my experience with people like that. And so they talked freely, I guess. And my friend's friend said to my friend, this is what he heard. They were talking, this was well after 9/11, they were just bragging how well everything had worked out. They executed it, and then the buildings came down, and everything came out wonderfully. And he's going to stand to make a bundle from it. I think that was before the court case had concluded. You have to understand that Larry Silverstein took out an extra insurance on the buildings 3 months before the attack, and the insurance policy was going to pay out double. Excuse me. If the buildings were to be destroyed by a terrorist attack, so each building was insured for $1 billion.
Well, right? he claimed that there was 2 separate attacks by 2 different planes, and wanted double the amount. And they said no.
Yeah. But he would already get. So $1 billion if it gets destroyed, mm-hmm. $2 billion per building if it's a terrorist attack. But he said, well, they're 2 separate attacks, so I should really get $4 billion per building.
Yeah.
Now that didn't fly. But my point here is that it has come to light, and no one has really opened that can of worms that I've seen officially, that the World Trade Center building needed to be demolished. There was concern around asbestos, a whole bunch of other stuff as well.
Oh yeah.
And they wanted to demolish a building like that. would have cost an arm and a leg. I mean, it would have just been super expensive, right? Plus, to make sure there was no collateral damage, no other buildings or infrastructure were destroyed in this demolition. I mean, that would have been a Herculean task. Now, if you look at the buildings, though, right? Apart from Building 7, look at Building 1 and 2, the two towers. They also pretty much collapsed on their footprint, which is, again, from a physics point of view, a highly unlikely thing unless it was helped along. So each floor collapsed as the above floors landed on it in a pancaking motion, right?
Yep.
And unless someone planned this, someone that understands engineering and physics and such things, that's for that to happen naturally. The odds of that are really, really, really slim. Yet it happened with both the towers.
Yeah.
Because if you look at the debris, it's all rubble and dust, Dave. There aren't terribly many large chunks or things that I mean, these things were high. They could have destroyed everything around them. And they, while there was, of course, significant destruction, they did not destroy as much collateral surroundings as one would expect if they had fallen, I guess, naturally.
Yeah. To demolish what those buildings would have taken years.
Oh, and it would have bankrupted Silverstein for sure.
That's correct, yeah.
So I'm not saying that's the only reason this happened. I mean, see, the thing is this, right? The more people benefit from something like this, the more likely it is that it didn't just happen. And with this particular event, the number of people benefiting is legion. If you follow all the threads, if you actually have the time, sit down and follow all the threads of all the people that benefited from the destruction of the World Trade Center and all the things that it caused and allowed to happen going forward. I mean, the biggest things, of course, are the creation of a new governmental department, Homeland Security, and the passing of Patriot 1 and 2 in America and other countries, Australia included, had similar legislation passed after that event. Okay, so the repercussions, they still echo through time into today. So the way the world looks today, all right, in a large part is due to 9/11. Sorry, but let's get to the second point, Dave.
Is that the no plane debris?
That's the one, sir.
Excellent. So witnesses at the scene who were in the building and had to crawl during the chaos report no sightings of any plane debris, no cockpit, no engines, no seats, nothing. Worse, the Pentagon is the most secure building in the world, and in 2001, that would mean hundreds of cameras on full-time recording every event outside of the building, not only by the Pentagon itself, but by the myriad of buildings around the Pentagon, yet not one video of a plane flying extremely low and hitting a building. Not one. Remember, there was the service station and the hotel. All of their footage was confiscated.
Yes.
Or, and it never seen light of day. That's got to remain in your mind.
Yep.
So all we have is an explosion and the hole with no evidence of a plane hitting the building, and these are the facts. Worse, professional pilots, including ex-Air Force pilots, report that there is no way they could have flown that plane that low at that alleged speed and hit the building. Yet the 9/11 Commission says it was an Arab pilot who could hardly fly a Cessna who did the deed. Finally, the only evidence that we do have of a plane that was hijacked comes from a phone call from Barbara Olson to her husband, Theodore Olson. Barbara Olson was a Republican conservative employee of Fox News, and her husband, Theodore Theodore Ted Logan. Anyway, was a member of the Bush administration as United States Solicitor General from 2001 to 2004. Wow.
Yeah, I know, right?
In legal terms, these people are not exactly at arm's length. Under cross-examination, they would be deemed biased and not credible witnesses, yet these two are the only connection we have to a plane hitting the Pentagon. That's shocking to me.
Right?
Yeah. Now, Mackie, you and I, we've spoken about this 1,000 times, and one of those things were that I couldn't sleep that night, and I watched this unfold. I was watching a live broadcast, and there was something really unusual about the Pentagon. The footage that we were getting, and remember that van that pulled up full of dudes with really big bags, like larger than a human, like sports bags, but they were larger than a human, and they put like a screen up so we couldn't see what they were doing. And when the screen came down, there's all the plane parts. Because when it was just a hole, there were light posts in the that courtyard in that area.
Yeah. They should have been cut. Yeah.
Which were cut down.
Yeah.
They weren't initially when there was only a hole. They were all intact. And everyone's saying, well, where's the plane? Even the windows beside the hole were intact where the wings would have hit. And remember, this is the chevron that was under construction. There were no employees in that section of the Pentagon.
That's exactly right.
And what was even more bizarre was why they were reconstructing the building, and that was to make it impervious to missile attack.
That's also correct.
Crazy. So
yeah. But hang on. Hang on. The Pentagon is very, very large. We have to say this, and this was the only section that's being renovated.
That's right.
Okay, so for I mean the odds of a plane being hijacked and hitting the one part of the Pentagon that is virtually empty.
That's right.
Right? On that day are once again astronomical. Sorry, go on.
Yeah. Now the people who crawled out weren't from the Chevron's exterior office space, but were from interior ones who had managed to come out the hole or were directed to come out the hole. The second part was what office, Mackie, was destroyed? What records were destroyed?
It was Rumsfeld's office.
Yeah, but wasn't it the day before when he said there was $3 trillion missing out of the budget?
2, but yes. So
yes, 2.
On September 10, 2001, Rumsfeld, was fronting up, I think, in Congress, I can't remember, and said, "Yeah, look, we seem to have an accounting error of $2 trillion." Now, this was actually talked about afterwards as well. He downplayed it. He says, "Look, it's an accounting error. It's just, it's just left pocket, right pocket kind of stuff." And I don't think so. But after 9/11, nobody was interested in those $2 trillion anymore.
Yep.
Okay, again, another benefit of this action.
A lot of money. A lot of money, and there's a lot of accountability to it. But you could easily have just said something as simple as, "Well, it was all black budget money. Don't worry about it. It's all good." And you could just go, "Oh, that's how much the black budget were." But wow, okay, maybe not. So that all of those things. Remember that every story that has more holes than a cheese grater has gaps, and the gap in the conversation that you're hearing from the official narrative has, like with all the holes, conversations occur and you end up filling these gaps. Once we just decided to, and not just Becky and I, but others, and the whole world looked into it, and we're trying to string together these facts, and you go, hang on a minute, there's gaping holes in here. And their facts are they should have had more facts. You know, my kids do a better job of trying to mislead me into believing someone else did it. They come up with backstories. There's simping, if you know what simping is, right? They'll have a full, not just an alibi, but for themselves, but for their friends. They'll have a whole backstory which you've got to listen to in order to make an evaluation. And in the end, I don't know. I'm kind of lost. I think they lost me halfway through. Not this. This has got nothing. So the speed at which the aircraft was flying at that altitude, at as close to ground level as possible, is not achievable with the engines in the aircraft. With that airframe and those engines, can't be done. You cannot get the plane to that speed, unless of course going directly down, which wasn't. When it did a large spiral, and if you're turning, you're slowing. So you've got to be very careful how you turn an aircraft to not cause more drag to actually slow yourself down. But yes, it was a decreasing spiral towards the ground, and that's what was said. However, with all the cameras, can't see it, never see it. We're never going to actually see it. And why would they never release footage of a plane hitting the Pentagon? And the only answer I can come up with, because it wasn't.
Because it didn't. There's no blame here.
Yeah. I reckon they did a test to see how the new construction was going. Is it impervious? Actually, in fact, it isn't. Look, you went 4 chevrons in. That can't be good. Let's change the plans then. Make it more impervious. I don't know. So what's point 3, Mackie? Because this is insane so far.
Look, it is a bit nuts. Shanksville, similarly, I don't know if you remember this, but there was a 4th plane which didn't actually hit a building, but some say it was on the way to the Sears Tower. I mean, we don't really know where it was going to hit, but anyway, it's the 4th plane they said was hijacked. But there's no evidence that a plane ever hit the ground. There's just burned dirt and shrubbery. The first videos from the scene are no longer available, and so we're left with what the government is saying about this thing. So I'll dare anyone on this listening to us right now, or maybe later on in the archives, find some footage, the original footage of the Shanksville crash. See if you can find something. According to the Shanksville mayor Ernie Stahl, there was no plane. He told German television March 2003. He said, "My sister and a good friend of mine were the first ones here," Stahl said. "They were standing on a street corner in Shanksville talking. Their car was nearby, so they were the first here. And the fire department came. Everyone was puzzled because the call had been that a plane had crashed, but there was no plane." There are family members of those on the plane that said they received calls, including the infamous "Let's roll" line yelled by one of the passengers. But where are the bodies? No bodies, no recovery of seats, engines, nothing.
No baggage.
Well, now, there's one other thing here as well, and this is important to think about. And I'm not 100% sure, but I just want to put it out there. Prior to today, I guess, back in 2001, this is when we're talking here, you couldn't actually make a mobile call or a handheld mobile phone
a cell call in the air. That's right.
Because there weren't any transponders. So the way mobile phones work is, believe it or not, a line of sight. So that's why you have cell towers. So if you're within an area that has a cell tower, your phone actually connects to it and calls through that cell tower. So the further away you are from these cell towers, the less likely it is that you can make a call, unless you have a satellite phone. If I have a satellite phone, right, and your phone is in connection with the satellite, so it's above you or somewhere near you at least, then you can make that call. But unless you're in a mobile coverage area, and that's only provided by cell towers, right, you cannot make a call. Now, if you've been out in the bush or on the parklands or wherever, you find that you can't get a signal, right? If you go to high ground, you might, because there might be a tower that is still line of sight to you, potentially. But if you don't have that, you don't make a call. So on the planes, as far as I know, and I'm happy to be corrected here, but as far as I know, back in the day, there weren't any transponders for mobile phones on planes. So you couldn't make a call from a mobile phone to
And the transponder amplified your signal. That's right. And they said at the speed at which you're traveling, the handshake alone would fail.
Well, that's it. Now, the handshake is like, you probably remember it from the old modem days. You know, that most satisfying of all sounds. It goes, then it goes, that means a connection was established between you and the other point you're trying to access. It's in the phone world, it's very similar. So if anybody has got information, and please tell me, correct me if I'm wrong as well, please. Was it possible back then, 2001, to make a mobile phone call from a plane? You can do it today.
It was analog back then too.
Yes.
Yep.
But because today you can. I know today you can, right?
Yeah.
You can, but could you do it then?
I'm gonna add something complex to this, Mackie. Did you know that burnt piece of ground where they spray painted the grass black? Because when grass catches fire, it doesn't go black; it burns, and is no longer grass. And that's something that's visible in the imagery from back then, if you can find something. And we did a show on that one specifically, but there was an actual air crash of a light plane some years earlier at that exact location. The divot that is there is from the prior air crash. It's a divot. It was kind of like an irrigation canal, and the divot was from the prior air crash, which just the grass grew over it. Right? That's it. They just cleaned up the scene and done. And then, hang on a minute. What is the likelihood of two planes years apart crashing at exactly within a square meter of each other?
It was a lottery day, Dave. It was definitely a lottery. Okay. Yeah. And you know, the more you analyze 9/11, the more you realize that indeed, if you ever were going to win the lottery, it would be on that day. Because all of the things, all of the things, everything that went either wrong or just happened, you know, to coincide with something else, or happened as an extremely unlikely event, is legion. I mean, almost everything on that day was in that category, right? I mean, they had moved all of the offensive capabilities.
A North Shield, yeah.
Yeah, North Shield, away from New York as well as Washington.
That's right.
And there was a military exercise underway as well, right? That had pretty much the same scenario that they were going through, which is similar actually what happened. But, you know, I don't know if you remember this, but there was an attack on the London Underground some years after. And where also, that very same day, there was also a training scenario that had that very same theme of you know, a bomb on a train or whatever. So
even the Boston Marathon bomb, they had a training day on as well.
Yeah. So look, all the things.
It's advised not to have training days.
Don't have training days. all the things that went wrong, or supposedly went wrong, or were incompetently handled, everything, right? Which is essentially everything. Everything. Because the thing is this: as soon as it's a plane, and this, I know people, I know aircraft controllers, believe it or not, and in fact, so do you, Dave, unbeknownst to you probably. Yes. But as soon as a plane veers off course, guess what happens?
Yeah, they scramble. That's right.
You don't let it go for minutes, let alone hours. You just don't. It becomes a problem immediately, right?
Yeah.
Oh no, that's okay. It's fine. Really? Oh yeah, don't worry about it. That's okay. But it's of course. Yeah, you know, it's of course, it's on course. Tomato.
So what they do is, if it flies straight, they scramble, and they want to make sure that the cockpit has the pilots in it and that they're not under duress to go somewhere in, and so they'll fly fighter planes because they can fly faster than the jets, and they'll fly up next to it, check in, and make radio contact if they can, or hand signals, and some of those are follow me signals, or imagine if the plane was at 40,000 feet and it lost oxygen, you might get a whole bunch of people at CO2'd out, and they just become popsicles.
That's what happens.
That can happen.
You know what the
ghost plane
funniest
they
thing?
call it, yeah.
You're right, but the funniest thing, well, it's not funny. It's not funny, haha funny, but funny, odd funny. The funniest thing on that day was that after the fact, everybody said, "Oh, we could never have imagined that terrorists would use planes in this fashion."
Mm-hmm.
Now, some 30 short years prior, actually, hang on, 34, what? No, about 40 to 40 years prior. I think it was 1962, but I could be wrong. There's something called Operation Northwoods. Now, Operation Northwoods is an actuality. It's not made up. Not some crazy conspiracy nutters idea of sowing fear and disinformation. But Operation Northwoods is a declassified document which had the CIA planning an action against Cuba. So Cuba was a thought on everybody's side. Nobody wanted to have communists this close to the American shore. I mean, that's fair enough, right? So what do? Well, you can't really invade them. And the Bay of Pigs was a disaster, and yet the Cuban exiles, they were squeaky wheels, saying, "Hey, depose Castro, give us back our sugar plantation and our rum factories, etc., etc." So there's a lot of money involved here in hopefully pushing communists out of Cuba again. But so the CIA needed a pretext, because you couldn't just invade. That's not something America likes to do. It likes to have a reason to do things, right? Or at least, even if it's a fake reason, it doesn't really matter. So what they were going to do is they're going to use civilian planes and crash them into American landmarks, and they would blame Castro for it, the Cuban. It'd be like a terrorist attack by Cuba. And there was a plan that the CIA hatched 30 to 40 years prior. I think it was 40 years prior to 9/11. Operation Northwoods. Now, I'm not saying that actually happened. What I'm saying is it was drawn up as a plan. Clearly, that plan was never put into action, because none of these planes were crashed. But it was in the drawers as a scenario by the CIA. And to say, in fact, CIA themselves said it, to say that they could never have imagined this could happen is complete nonsense. Because there's one other critical piece of information. Which is, there are entire departments, and not just in America, this goes for Australia as well, their only job is to game scenarios.
That's right.
That's all they do. They come up with even the most far-fetched. In fact, alien invasion is a scenario.
It is.
Or alien first contact. I mean, there are scenarios that where you would go, that's not true. That's insane. That didn't happen. Yes, it did. It actually did. They do game it through because they want to be prepared. And you know what? I applaud them for it. And I think that's a good thing. We need to have this kind of forward thinking. I think that's excellent. But to say that disingenuously, we could never have imagined that. That's nonsense. You did imagine it. You gamed it through. It was part of your planning. Okay. Which is interesting, by the way. Sorry to diverge just briefly here.
Do it.
Did you know recently we sent a projectile or a spacecraft toward an asteroid or a comet?
The DART mission, that was.
The DART mission. And with the express purpose of altering its course.
Yep.
The not the DART, but the I think it was a comet. Was it a comet?
It's basically a rock with another small rock as a moon, and the mission's plan was to hit the small orbiting moon to see if it can ultimately, like, at what speed, do all the calculations work for this to happen? Can we alter its trajectory?
And it did.
Yes,
it did. Now you have to ask yourself. I mean, again, I applaud this. This is excellent forward thinking. God forbid it should ever become necessary, but at least now we've got some real world data not just a movie, to see.
We didn't catapult Bruce Willis against his will up into it.
That's not. We have to get Chuck Norris and put him against the guy, because they would just all run away. No, but so our bureaucracies, our military institutions, they do game a whole bunch of stuff through. They really do. And again, I'm all for that. But to say that we couldn't have imagined it is complete nonsense.
Oh yeah, completely.
Which brings us to the planes and collapse, and then you get the perpetrators. At 8:46 a.m., the government says 5 hijackers crashed American Airlines Flight 11 into the World Trade Center's North Tower, and at 9:03 a.m., another 5 hijackers crashed United Airlines Flight 175 into the South Tower. Okay. Average Joe Blow witnesses on the ground say they saw planes hit the building, and clearly from the video evidence from both mainstream media and some amateurs on the ground, we do see planes hit the building. But the plane markings are not clear, and we are not sure if those planes were in fact the planes that the government said were the flights in question. What we do know is that, and I mentioned this before, that Larry Silverstein procured a lease for the World Trade Center in July 2001, so only 3 months prior, right? And won the bid despite being outbid by a rival. And it just so happens Larry Silverstein also had the lease on building number 7.
Yeah, that's true. So, goodness me. All right. Point 5, 9/11, the perpetrators. According to the government, the leader of the 9/11 attack was former CIA agent Osama bin Laden, and the mastermind operations manager was Khalid Sheikh Mohammed. They said they were 19. So they said there were 19 hijackers involved in the attacks, and the government-sponsored 9/11 Commission concluded so. As anyone who understands crime investigations knows, one must follow the evidence. And the evidence says a lot that the government does not say. Firstly, the alleged evildoers are dead and their Al-Qaeda organization is decimated. More, they don't appear to have benefits from the attacks except notoriety. Oh, and all of those virgins. Who did benefit from the attacks? Were the war profiteers and anti-civil liberties groups? The text is terrible. In the days after 9/11, the government waged 2 major wars and reduced the American public from a once free society to complete controlled corporate fascism. In the wars, trillions of dollars were made. The evidence is everywhere. The global beneficiaries are everywhere in plain sight, while the American people are saddled with a broken economy, no relative freedom, and a bleak future.
Well, that's absolutely the case, though, right? I mean, a lot of people made a lot of money. And I'm not even talking about the people that shorted the airline stock.
Oh, no. So also I think the big surprise here about the perpetrators, Mickey, was that it was being called out in the broadcast of the actual event already.
Yeah, I know.
And,
I mean,
wow, that's some journalism right there.
So let's just let's follow that logic, because I remember this very clearly, because they had fingered Osama bin Laden within hours of this happening. So what we saw just prior to this, in the morning, on the morning of September 11th, 2001, we saw the complete failure of the entire military, industrial, and intelligence complex of the United States of America and their allies. It was a complete failure because it happened. The attacks happened, and there was nothing done to prevent them. There was no information coming through that they could be prevented. So the entire machinery of the Americans and their allies, right, in this particular instance, military, industry, in intelligence, all of it, it failed completely. However, within hours of the attack, we knew exactly who had done it. The same machinery that had just catastrophically failed gave us the perpetrators in a matter of hours. Now, I'm just a simple kind of guy, Dave.
Really?
Right? I like my eggs soft boiled and my toast, on the brown side. And that's just, I like simple life. Simple life is good. But that, I'm sorry, man, that is completely insane. And what is even more insane is that not a single person, because let's assume this was failure. This was a complete failure of everything, and somebody, not one somebody, but many somebodies failed to do their job, right? Not a single person that I know of, or that has been reported on, which reminds me of something else which I mentioned, was ever actually indicted or punished or lost their jobs over this. Not one. Do you know what this reminds me of?
What?
This reminds me of 2008 and the Great Collapse.
Oh,
all the bankers and all the great one guy, one lonely fall guy trader was arrested and jailed, and I think it was actually he was of Arab extraction, if I'm not mistaken, but I do apologize.
Profiling.
But I know, but it was just the one dude out of the multitude, the legion yet again of people that did something wrong. So this, and again, but in 9/11, not a single person was reprimanded for having been asleep at the job.
That's the same as Enron, too big to fail. Yeah, so every single audit that had been performed in the lead up to its failing was all just make believe.
Yeah.
And it had failed. Well, now all of the dust is still settling. I'm out of here, right? What audit?
Yeah.
The same
like,
thing.
what?
The same thing with 9/11. So
no, you stop it.
So look, as far as the pancaking event of the building is concerned, I just want to say something straight away, and that is the way that the construction was that the inner core was super strong, and it's an exoskeleton styled building with very few vertical supports. There's only long trusses from the inside to the external wall, so it's called an external exoskeleton design. It's not an internal building like you might be familiar with now, where there's a huge column every once in a while within the building floor space on every floor. That isn't the way it was designed. It was designed with all this grand open spaces, and that's really nice. So they built, metal trusses from the outside steel. The outside steel wall had huge square, or you could call it rectangular tubes, really super thick, and everything was riveted together. So they didn't weld them together, they riveted them together. And that was ultimately the strongest thing you can make, kind of like Meccano, right, with nuts and bolts. But those rivets have an amount of shear which will make it fail. And that shear, as the building started to collapse, exceeded the capability of all the rivets across from the core all the way to the outside. So the entire platform was just roofing material flooded with cement. That's what every floor was. So they had like a tin roof, panned out from the inside core all the way across those trusses to the outside, and they just basically flood filled that with 100 mil of concrete. That's sufficient. It works, right? And it had worked, but there's no independent floor that could fail that would cause the next to pancake unless you had a sizable event, and that certainly did have a sizable event. That same compression of air where you're trying to concertina that between those two floors that are pancaking would also amount to all the other little blowouts you see. I don't believe that every floor was hot, although some of those beams that I saw after right, where the building had come down, dead set looked like they had their thermite shaped charges cut through, and all the evidence is gone. They took it all away and they disposed of the whole lot so quickly and without studying or having independent study or examination of the dust. I think what they didn't want was for people to find all the asbestos in it. So anyone covered in that grey dust was more likely to pass away in the next 50 years anyway. It doesn't matter what your age, because you get asbestosis. That's one of the big things. The second, all the lighting, fluorescent battens all have a single drop of mercury in it. And mercury is really bad for you. Yeah. I mean, that's extraordinarily bad. One of my big questions, how can you have a fire that just lasts for 3 weeks and never gets like molten metal fire in the rubble? That's beyond me as well, how that can occur if there was only the plain heat source. I'm not going to say plains fuel can't melt steel. You're right, it can't, but it can heat it up to a certain extent and then it can have some fail. But I don't believe that was also the only element in which caused the buildings to collapse. Now, the reason why I say that is because of the architects and the architects and engineers for 9/11. They wanted to actually see the details that were hidden. They wanted to make them public so they could examine it in order to build a building strong enough to not come down in the future. That's what their whole mission is, just purely educational. But we're only using the same tech today that was built with. Wow. Hey, that's a mistake. We should learn from it. So share with us, 9/11 Commission, with the details. And they didn't. They still haven't. They've still got their head out, waiting for.
Color me disappointed.
So, we've seen buildings in Japan and buildings in where is it, Spain or Mexico, that were of the same construction that burnt for 24 hours and still didn't come down.
Correct.
So that, and Building 7, who needed to have all 80 columns fail simultaneously in the basement that had never caught fire, for that building to come down as it did. And all of those things, these are those little tiny things that they skip. Yeah, we've all seen the footage. We've seen the footage of all of it. Most of us were there, online watching, in the media, right?
Yeah.
We were there watching it
Yes.
on the edge of our chairs with our mouths open, agape, because we can't believe this is happening.
Yes.
In our world. But then,
I remember it. So go on, yeah.
But then, to have learned that this thing we witnessed, which was so appalling, it's changed the planet.
Mm-hmm.
To hear that, if there was a scenario where some billionaire, like we're trying to do this thing, says the government, who can we enlist to help us? We need a really big event. Well, what can we have? Oh, maybe a plane going into buildings. Yeah, cool. Well, what buildings? Well, what buildings would be the best ones? I don't know. The Twin Towers, maybe. Oh, I couldn't. Really? Do you think we could? Yeah, well, it's still July, right? We'll it's July. We'll talk to him. It's Larry. We'll call Larry up and say hello. And they go, well, look, would you like to be part of this thing? I don't know. Talk to me. It's worth a lot to you. Well, I'm in, right? What do I need to do? Nothing. I don't have to do anything. If you want to tell some people, you can get them out of the buildings, but don't worry about it. We'll figure it a bit later on.
No stairs? No stairs. It's all good.
And so the very next thing is, as soon as he hangs up from that call, he rings the insurance company. I need to insure my buildings for the rest of the day. For any reason? No. Well, I've just been kind of concerned, right? Click.
Yeah.
Done. Because if you were anyone, you would want the buy-in of the people whose buildings were going to be a part of it.
Of course.
I
course
really
we did.
think that they thought by taking out the corner of the building that it would make the
Yeah.
whole building bend at that point and fail,
Yes.
and then smash into. When you look at the layout, that it would then come down and smash. It'd be really dramatic, great on film, but to just have a small fire and and there really wasn't much else going on, and most of the plane parts came out the other side of the building. It didn't do it for me as much as if the building like was it not The Day After Tomorrow, the other one, the one where the buildings that they're flying through a plane and they're trying to avoid all the buildings coming down because of the earthquakes and all that crazy thing. There's huge waves destroying things, and they're flying. There's earthquakes in LA, and they're flying a plane almost halfway down a building's height, and the building's coming over, and they're avoiding it, and that's Hollywood. That kind of building destruction is Hollywoodized, but that's what I kind of expected that they were going to, that they thought they were going to achieve by taking a corner of the building out. But of course, it didn't do anything of the sort. The buildings just sucked it up. Hey, we're strong. We're good.
Yeah, 100%.
I really the night 2012. Thanks, nobody. Yeah, 2012. The movie. The other thing was
that's right.
I hope we'll get onto it, but later we'll talk about who the building security head of security was.
See, all links of that person.
Yep.
That we had, I know we had them. They're no longer in our show notes, and I can't find any links to the who.
That's right.
Online.
Yep.
Nothing.
It's
completely gone.
But
I remember because we made a big hoo-ha about this when we first had the show years ago, right? In fact, this show we did 8 years ago.
Yeah.
It was show number 133. And we I know we talked about it. It's almost like a Mandela thing now with this. It's like, and all it like I know everybody on here is now mystified what we're talking about. We will get to it. We will explain to you what we mean. But the head of building security was connected to a very special family.
That's right. You might have heard the family. I think he I think one of the members of the family was listening to a children's story.
And no, not that family.
Oh, a different one.
Family. Yeah,
Don't say it now. We'll build up to it.
I'm not going to say it. I'm not going to say it. Yeah, but a family that held a similar position.
Right.
The same position, in fact.
Yeah. Okay.
Just prior. Just anyway. Look, I don't know if we've got time to go just because there's another 24 hard facts we want to share with you.
Of course there is.
And these are like hard facts.
Yeah.
Which you can't just. Oh yeah, no, that's not the case. No, it really is. I think we'd probably do a couple, so you get a bit of a taste.
All right. Well, let's do that.
So look. Number one, nanothermite was found in the dust at Ground Zero. Peer-reviewed in the Bentham Open Chemical Physics Journal. Niels Harrit, Thermite Bentham, The Great Thermite Debate, John Cole, Iron-Rich Spheres, Stephen Jones, Limited Metallurgical Examination, FEMA C13 Appendix C6 nanotubes. That's where it comes from. Okay, so nanothermite was found in the dust at Ground Zero. Now, thermite is a high temperature substance which is used for demolition, especially of steel trusses and such, because it cuts through it like butter.
Yeah, so like a shape charge, but you ignite it. So aluminium oxide and iron oxide.
Yes, it's super. It just and some of the photos we saw there, it looked like those steel 4x4s enlargers had been cut with a laser.
Yeah,
I mean, obviously not a laser, but that's what it looked like.
Yeah.
I think we can do this. Do the second one. We can do that one.
Yeah, cool. All right. So 1,700 plus engineers and architects support a real independent 9/11 investigation. And now there's a thought. There are now 1,700 architects and engineers for 9/11 Truth. One could say that this constitutes a small minority of the total number of architects and engineers, which is true. A more interesting question would be, what percentage of architects and engineers are against 9/11 Truth? truth in this case would refer to an alternate version of events than the official version. And a still more interesting question would be what percentage of those architects and engineers who are against 9/11 truth have examined the evidence presented by the 9/11 architects and engineers for 9/11 truth. If even one architect or engineer challenged the official version of 9/11, this would be the grounds for us to challenge the official version also. Given that there are 1,699 additional experts that challenge the official version, so much stronger are the grounds for us to challenge it as well.
I think that's a fair point. The third hard fact is that the total collapse of World Trade Center 7 in 6.5 seconds at free fall acceleration missed amidst 2.25 seconds. Larry Silverstein used the term pull it. Steel-framed high-rise buildings have never totally collapsed from fire or structural damage. Building 7 was also not hit by a plane.
Yes. Dick Cheney was in command of NORAD on 9/11 while running war games. Stand down order. Of course, the orders still stand. Have you heard anything to the contrary? Norman Mineta testimony gave the order to shoot down Flight 93, NORAD drills.
6 out of the 10 commissioners believed the 9/11 Commission report was set up to fail. Co-chairs Hamilton and Keane. It was a 30-year conspiracy. The White House has played cover-up. Max Cleland resigned. John Farmer.
Yeah, I'm gonna stop it there because we're less than a minute left.
Running out.
And
yes,
another crazy hour has gone by. Now, this is Dave and Mecky's Shiny Side Out, episode 552, part 2, the second hour. And we've come to an end, and there's the music. Coming up next is Jer Bear's awesome show, After Hours. Do ring in, listen in, ring in, be part of it. And we'll see you on Tuesday and Thursday mornings in US time. Until then, take care.